So you'll. Okay, great. So here's a copy of Third Canto. Yeah.
First.
It's another one, yeah.
So Shwara wanted the link to join. Do you know which link is it to join this?
Why you click on Zoom is 38641888840, and then the password is Sandra2 with a capital S.
Capital S.
Yeah.
386
Send us the link.
418 8407.
You know, it's exactly the same meeting room where we meet usually.
Okay.
When we have our meetings.
Okay.
Same.
I was asked to give class today, and I am humbled and grateful for the opportunity. And I like to start by offering permission to the assembled Vaishnavas, especially the Vaishnavas that are much senior than me, to allow me to speak. And I also want to offer my respects to all my teachers who have opened my eyes with a torch of knowledge. And I want to ask, I usually like to start with an invocation. Mukam karoti vachalam pangoram gayate girim. Yat kripatamaham bande si guru dinatarinam. Paramananda madhavam si chaitanya meshwaram. Which loosely translates to, by the grace of the Lord, the paraplegic can cross mountains and the fool can speak eloquently. So may this fool speak a few logic words. Yeah. So we'll read from where we left off yesterday, which is Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, text 7. Excellent. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Skrityam Naram Chaiva Narotamam Devim Saraswati Yatsam Tato Jayam Viraye. So text 7. I'll read first the word for word, then we'll read the Sanskrit and then the translation and the purport by His Divine Grace, Aishi Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada. Shah, that. Vai, certainly. Vishvashram, Vishvashrijam, of the gigantic, Virat, form, Garbha, total energy, Deva, living energy, Karma, activity of life, Atma, self, Shakitman, full with potencies, Vibhavaja, divided, Atmana, by himself, Atmanam, himself, Ekada, in oneness, Dasada, in 10, Tirtha, and in 3. Savai Vishva Shrijam Garbo, Deva Karmatma Shakitman Vibhavajat Manam Ekada Dashada Tida Savai Vishvashridam Garbo Deva Karmatma Sakitman Vibhavajat Manatmanam Ekada Dashada Trida Savai Vishvashridam Garbo Deva Karmatma Shakitman Vibhavajat Manam Ekada Dashada Trida
Savai Vishvashridam Garbo
Vishvashridam Garbo
Deva Karmatma Shaktiman
Deva Karmatma Shaktiman
Vibhavajat Manam
Vibhavajat
Ekada Dasada Trida
Ekada Dashada Trida
Vishvashridam Garbo
Vishvashridam Garbo
Deva Karmatma Shaktiman
Deva Karmatma Shaktiman Vibhavajat Manam Ekada Dashada Trida
Savai Vishvashridam Garbo
Vishvashridam Garbo
Deva Karmatma Shaktiman
Deva Karmatma Shaktiman
Vibhavajat Manatmanam
Vibhavajat Manam
Ekada Dashadatita
Ekada Dashada Trida
Vishvashridam Garbo
Vishvashridam Garbo
Deva Karmatma Shaktiman
Deva Karmatma Shaktiman Vibhavajat
Ekada Dashadatita
Ekada Dashada Trida
Savai Vishvashridam Garbo
Savai Vishvashridam Garbo
Deva Karmatma Shaktiman
Deva Karmatma Shaktiman
Vibhavajat Manatmanam
Vibhavajat Manam
Ekada Dashadatita
Ekada Dashada Trida
Vai Vishvasridam Garbo
Savai Vishvashridam Garbo
Deva Karmatma Shaktiman
Deva Karmatma Shaktiman Vibhavajat Ekada Dashada Trida
Vishvashridam Garbo
Savai Vishvashridam Garbo
Karmatma Shaktiman
Deva Karmatma Shaktiman Vishvajat Manam
Dashadatita
Ekada Dashada Trida. Anyone online would like to invocate the Sanskrit?
Savai Vishvasridam Garbo
Savai Vishvashridam Garbo
Karmatma Shaktiman
Deva Karmatma Shaktiman
Vibhavajat Manatmanam
Vibhavajat Manam
Dashadatita
Ekada Dashada Trida. Translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The total energy of the Mahatattva in the form of the gigantic Virat Rupa divided himself by himself into the consciousness of the living entities, the life of activity, and self-identification, which are subdivided into 1, 10, and 3 respectively. I'll read that again. The total energy of the Mahatattva in the form of the gigantic Virat Rupa divided himself by himself into the consciousness of the living entities, the life of activity, and self-identification, which are subdivided into 1, 10, and 3 respectively. Purport. Consciousness is the sign of the living entity or the soul. The existence of the soul is manifested in the form of consciousness, called Jnana Shakti. The total consciousness is that of the gigantic Virat Rupa, and the same consciousness is exhibited in individual persons. The activity of consciousness is performed through the air of life, which is of 10 divisions. The airs of life are called prana, apana, udana, vyana, and samana, and are also differently qualified as naga, kurma, karkara, devadatta, and dhananjaya. The consciousness of the soul becomes polluted by the material atmosphere, and those various activities are exhibited in the false ego of bodily identification. The various activities are described in Bhagavad Gita as Bahushaka Hihanastasa Cha Buddha Yo Vyavasayanam. The conditioned soul is bewildered into various activities for want of pure consciousness. In pure consciousness, the activity is one. The consciousness of the individual soul becomes one with the supreme consciousness when there is complete synthesis between the two. I'll read that again. The consciousness of the individual soul becomes one with the supreme consciousness when there is complete synthesis between the two. The monists believe that there is only one consciousness, whereas the Sattvatas, or the devotees, believe that although there is undoubtedly one consciousness, they are one because there is agreement. The individual consciousness is advised to dovetail with the supreme consciousness, as instructed by the Lord in Bhagavad Gita 1866. Sarvadharma parityajam mamekam saranam prajam. The individual consciousness, Arjuna, is advised to dovetail with the supreme consciousness and thus maintain his conscious purity. It is foolish to try to stop the activities of consciousness, but they can be purified when they are dovetailed with the supreme. This consciousness is divided into 3 modes of self-identification according to the proportions of purity. Adhyatmika, or self-identification with the body and mind. Adhivautika, or self-identification with the material products. And Adhidaivika, or self-identification as a servant of the Lord. Of the 3, Adhidaivika, self-identification, is the beginning of purity of consciousness in pursuance of the desire of the Lord. There's so much to unpack here. It's very, very mind-blowing, but I wanna go to a different place. Actually, I want to start by taking a meta view of where we are in the text and how we got here, because I think for me, it's important to understand how the parts connect to each other and what is the flow that brings us to this very very far out descriptions of the universe that are for me hard to comprehend. And what's the purpose of this conversation, really? why are we talking about how is the universe created and it rests upon the Lord? And so I want to step back a little bit. And also because sometimes when reading spiritual text, especially early on in our devotional life, it can be very confusing. There's so many names and personalities and characters that appear, and it's what is this Vidura that's inquiring from Maitreya, and where does this come from? So it's good to step back. Right now, if we dive into the text, it's we're studying a tree, and we're looking at the tree, and we're looking at the branches, and we're looking at the leaves and studying the leaves in detail. And sometimes it's appropriate to step back and kind of zoom out of the forest and have a meta view why are we studying this particular tree in this moment? And the place where I like to start, or actually, the first thing I like to say is, for me, this is important because, first of all, I'm a person of systems. I am farsighted, like physically, I am farsighted, but also my mind works in that way, where I want to see how things connect, how the systems connect, how the parts connect, and in a way, this is faith affirming for me. It's deeply faith affirming to understand all the components and how they come together. And the place where my mind starts, and the way I will share with you to the best of my ability, to the way that I have comprehended, which I encourage anyone to add anything that I've missed or any omissions that I bring, or anything you want to add to the conversation at any moment, please do so. I like to start with the Mahabharata, actually, with the story of the Kurus. The Mahabharata is this epic, beyond epic, historic recollection of the events of the Kuru dynasty, which happens around the time that Krishna is present in this earth, and there's quite a few places where this connects to our tradition of bhakti, That's where at the center, or maybe 2/3 of the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita is spoken. So that's one of the first texts that's most important for the Bhakti tradition. And really towards the end, some people say it's at the end of the Mahabharata, some people say it's, we could say like at the end of the stories of the Mahabharata is when the Bhagavatam is spoken. And the Mahabharata really starts with the dynasty, the Kuru dynasty. There are three heads of the dynasty, which are three kings: Pandu, Dhritarashtra, which you might have heard the name if you read the Bhagavad Gita. The name Dhritarashtra is quite present there, and Vidura, which is also present here. We'll suspend Vidura for a second, but Pandu is, I think he's the second. Dhritarashtra is actually the older of the dynasty, so technically he should be king, but he's born blind. He's born by a curse. He's the blind king, so he's not really meant to be the king, the ruler. So therefore Pandu is meant to be the king, and he has five children known as the Pandavas, which technically are not his children, because he's not allowed to have children, but we can really unpack that. Yeah, but he has five children, of which the most famous in our tradition is Arjuna. So Pandu is the father of Arjuna. And Pandu dies very early in their lives, and the four Pandavas are left under the caretaker of Dhritarashtra, which is the blind king, which becomes king by default by his brother not being on this earth, and by his other brother Vidura being the son of a maidservant, basically. So he's kind of by default, he becomes blind king. And he has his own kings, which are called the Kauravas. And so they're the Pandavas, the sons of Pandu, and the Kauravas, which you might have heard both names. And in the upbringing, there's some, they're kind of like treat each other like brothers, cousins. They're friendly to each other, but they don't really get along, the Pandavas and the Kauravas. There's a lot of animosity from the Kauravas towards the Pandavas, and this leads to quite a few series of unfortunate events, tragic events. I would say like unpious events that happen, where eventually the Pandavas are sent into exile. They're sent into exile by a series of events that I won't get into, because we can have a whole series on that. But they're sent into exile, and then in the exile they live for 13 years into exile. And then when supposedly when they come back from exile, they're allowed a portion of their kingdom. And during this whole time, Dhritarashtra's son Duryodhana is kind of de facto ruling, although his father is really the king. He's kind of doing his own whimsical will throughout the empire. And eventually, when the exile is over and the Pandavas come back, he decides, like, I'm not going to give them their kingdom, their rightful kingdom. And there's a series of efforts by many people to convince the blind king that you need to return the kingdom to the right heirs of the kingdom, the Pandavas. And this just doesn't happen. And a series of personalities and very convincing arguments throughout the Mahabharata start to unfold to the point where like you read several chapters and it becomes incredibly frustrating how this guy just doesn't get it. Like it's like, come on. And the amazing thing is that he actually, every time he hears advice, he can't argue with it. Like he hears it and he's like, yeah, this is the right thing. I should do it. Yes, I should return the kingdom. But then he doesn't do it.
He's so blind.
He's so blind. He's like literally like physically blind and completely blinded by his son. So much so that even Krishna goes and speaks to him and he says, hey, like return the kingdom. And he hears everyone in the assemble is hearing Krishna speaking. Some people hear with intense devotion and love, and some people are kind of like, oh, what is Krishna saying? What am I supposed to do with it? And Dhritarashtra actually hears very openly. To some extent, he agrees with everything that Krishna is saying, but he's just blind. He's not willing to do the right thing. And in fact, I can relate, and we can all relate to that. We can call it the Dhritarashtra syndrome, when we know what we're supposed to do, and we've heard it many times from many people, and we still won't do it. Yeah, that is
We are blind.
I am blind, and I have a lot of Dhritarashtra syndrome. But I read all this wisdom literature, and it speaks to me, and it's irrefutable in my heart, and I still won't do it. So eventually, this escalates into the Kurukshetra war, which is where we can call it like a crescendo, right? Where like imagine like all of North America and Europe on one side, and China and Asia on the other side, and the whole world is involved, and the world's about to explode and get destroyed, and there's this war that's about to happen. And right before the war is about to happen, both the Kauravas and the Pandavas go see Krishna, and they say, well, Krishna, we need your help. And actually what happens is that one of the Kauravas arrives first to see Krishna, and then Arjuna arrives second, but Krishna's sleeping actually, and Krishna's in his bed, and Arjuna sits at the foot of the bed by the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, and then Krishna opens his eyes and sees Arjuna first. And so the Kaurava said, no, I was here first, I get to choose. I get to ask first. And he said, well, you were both here. You're right first, but I saw Arjuna first. So Krishna basically offers, I can either give you my army, which is an incredible army, or I can be on your side, but I will not fight. Even if I'm on your side, I will not take arms. I will not get involved in the war. I'll just be with you. And Arjuna very quickly immediately says, Krishna, be on our side. We don't care about the army, because wherever there's Krishna, there's victory. And the Kauravas choose to take on the army. And so imagine like this war is about to explode. I think the whole world would be very wrapped in attention, right? Like we were all glued to CNN or whatever it is, right? We're like, wow, like the world's about to explode, and this is the moment when the Bhagavad Gita is spoken, where like there's a lot of tension and intention. It's like this crescendo that's happening, and then the Gita is spoken right before the war happens. And so there's Mahabharata, the story of the Pandavas, how they're sent into exile, how they come back, and then this crescendo of the Bhagavad Gita being spoken. And then the war is terrible for everyone. No one wins. The Pandavas lose their children in horrible, horrible ways that it's like really hard to imagine how tragic it is. And eventually they're established as legitimate rulers of the earth, and they rule for a certain time, and then they leave. At some point they decide, okay, it's time to leave this earth. They leave towards the Himalayas. That's also around the time that Krishna leaves this earth, which is kind of like another important point in the history of the Mahabharata, is that this is the beginning of Kali Yuga. This is when Dwapara Yuga ends, and this is when Kali Yuga begins, when Krishna leaves. And right before the Pandavas leave, they install Parikshit Maharaj, which is the grandson of Arjuna, the son of Abhimanyu, which is the son of Arjuna and Subhadra, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
And so Parikshit Maharaj is installed as ruler of the earth, and it is said that he was such a benevolent ruler. I know for us it's hard to understand what a benevolent king is. We think of like kings and emperors, like dictators and terrible people. Actually, it is said that there was no famine, no natural disasters, no calamities happening because the empire was ruled with so much benevolence and love and compassion and dedication and adherence to the spiritual principles, that the earth was just satisfied and everyone who was in the kingdom was satisfied. Govinda shared a joke with me one day that it was such a great emperor that you wanted to pay your taxes. You're looking forward to tax day. And even other kingdoms would want to annex themselves. They're like, oh, we want to be part of whatever's happening there. We want to be part of it. And eventually this leads to another tragic event, which is that this wonderful emperor, which is to some extent holding back Kali Yuga out of the kingdom, is cursed to die. And he's cursed to die in 7 days. And he fully accepts the curse. In many ways, when you read about how he's cursed, it feels very unfair. It feels like he can go to a very grungy place, or a very he could have done a lot of things, but he accepts his faith as the will of the Lord, and he accepts his faith and full responsibility for his actions. That's the other thing he does. He's fully responsible because he did offend the Brahmana, and eventually he ends up being cursed by the son of the Brahmana who he had offended. So he accepts that will, and through that acceptance and that responsibility, he says, "Well, I have 7 days to leave. What do I do? Like, okay, like time for liberation." So he gathers all the sages and he says, "All right, I want to know, what do I have to do? What is the person that is about to die supposed to do?" And that's what's spoken here, the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the fruit of all Vedic knowledge. Sometimes the Mahabharata can, like, the way I see it is like, it's this beautiful banyan tree that you can explore and jump and like look at it, and it's like this amazing gigantic banyan tree. And the Bhagavatam is like this seed of the banyan tree, where everything is within the seed, the DNA, everything that is necessary for life is right there. Everything that we need for spiritual life is right there, condensed into the Srimad Bhagavatam. And so that's kind of like the progression. And at the end, there's the Srimad Bhagavatam that's spoken, which we're enjoying. And so we'll go back a little bit before that, because in a lot of the spiritual texts, actually, where we're reading are conversations between people, actually, or conversations within conversations even. In fact, if we read the Bhagavad Gita, we're really hearing what Sanjay expressed to Dhritarashtra. It begins with Sanjay speaking and it ends with Sanjay closing after having heard. And in this case, Parikshit Maharaj, in this canto, he is hearing about Vidura, his great-grand-uncle, I guess. Yeah, great-grand-uncle. And how in that moment that I mentioned earlier, where Krishna is goes to the assembly and speaks to Dhritarashtra that he should give back the kingdom. He should give back the kingdom. A little bit after Vidura has a conversation with Dhritarashtra, and he says, "Hey, like, this is," he gives him advice. He says, "This is the right thing to do." And Vidura actually is very offended by Dhritarashtra, who calls him, "You're the son of a maidservant. You're spying on the other side. Why are you saying this?" And so he surrenders. He puts his bow down and he leaves the kingdom. And again, he accepts this as the will of the Lord. He says, "All right, how do I create win-win out of this?" And in fact, that's another place where I can think he could have gone to a very grungy places. And how can you say that to me? You're the one that's wrong. No, all right, this is my time to leave. And he decides to basically go into a spiritual pilgrimage. And so he goes around, and that's where this canto starts, or where we're coming to this point where Vidura is having conversations. He meets with Uddhava, which is one of the closest and most intimate associates of Lord Krishna, childhood pastime friend, very, very dear. He hears about Krishna from Uddhava, and then Uddhava asks him to go and see Maitreya. to hear from Maitreya. And so then at this point, Vidura goes and meets with Maitreya, and a lot of the way the spiritual texts are revealed to us is through very powerful questions. You know, when these wonderful personalities meet sages, they don't just go and say, "Hey, what's up? You know, tell me something," or "What's that thing?" They actually elaborate very profound questions that even by themselves, the questions are enlightening, and they reveal consciousness, and they reveal the attitude of devotion and service and desire to know the Supreme in very intimate ways. And so that's how actually he asked Maitreya to tell me about the Lord. I want to know more about the Lord. I want to know. And he says, I want to know how he creates the universes. And that's how we get to this point that Maitreya is actually speaking about how the Lord created the universes. And of course, Vidura could have just sat under the stars and looked at how they rotate and calculate the distance between them and try to understand how the universe is created, which is what Yogavinda was talking about yesterday, Anumana and Pratyaksha, which is ascending knowledge that we use, that we get from our senses, which is Anumana, and Pratyaksha, which is what we infer from what our senses are perceiving. So our senses might see smoke over there, and so I infer, oh, there's got to be a fire there. And that's sometimes called as ascending knowledge. And ascending knowledge has really what I would call a glass ceiling. There's only so far we can get with it. There's only so far we can get with it. And 2 days ago, I mentioned that in the class that we can't really reach God with the intellect, right? And that's what the meaning of that is, that we can't really reach God with the intellect, with like our senses and our intellect. We can't really reach God. We require descending knowledge, which is sabda, which is actually what Vidura is doing here. He's going to Maitreya and asking, hey, actually, I'm not gonna use my senses and my intelligence to figure this out, but I'm gonna talk to someone who has received that knowledge and can give it to me. And Maitreya actually, I don't think he received it. I think he was present during the cosmic creation, and that's what he's describing here. So he's describing what he saw during the cosmic creation. And I think another really important point for me that I read last night in looking at this series of chapters and how they connect is that really my understanding of where we are in the reading and why we're elaborating on the creation of the universe is not so that I can go and scientifically say I have the answers. You astrologists and astronomers, you got it wrong. These are the answers. Really, the intention of Vidura is he wants to know the Lord. He wants to really know him and develop devotion, and that's why he's asking. You know, he's asking in the mood of, I want to know who this amazing personality is and how can I connect with him, and it's very faith affirming for me to hear that. Because it nurtures me in ways that sometimes trying to approach this from an intellectual perspective doesn't nurture me. So yesterday, Govinda was talking about the roadmap. We were talking about the roadmap, how this Srimad Bhagavatam, this Bhagavad Gita, the books that Prabhupada gave us are roadmaps for us to advance in spiritual life, and they have markers and milestones that we can explore and we can discover, and we develop faith through them. And that's one way to develop faith in Shastra. And for me, another way that I've noticed that faith has increased as I read Shastra is that although there are things that are really difficult for me and hard to comprehend, that seem very far out, and being like, whoa, and some of them are majestic, poetic, beautiful. It's like, wow, like when I read Mahabharata, I'm very attracted to it. It's like the stories that are developed are just amazing stories. Like they captivate my attention in very profound ways that are, I could say, like almost like dreamy ways. But then the wisdom that comes out of those stories, it's deeply nurturing and grounding, and like it speaks to my soul in ways that very few things speak to my soul, in ways that nothing else actually speaks to my soul. I remember the first time that I had that experience. It was like I read a lot of philosophy. I read a lot of religious books. read a lot of very esoteric Buddhist books, but then the way that some of Prabhupada's books, the way the Sri Upanishad spoke to me, the way the Mahabharata speaks to me, the wisdom that comes out of it is like so nurturing. It's like, wow, I have arrived. It's a feeling like I've arrived. This whatever I'm feeling right now, that's what I want to feel. The text, maybe logically some things don't make sense, but the nurturing in the heart is just very, very profound for me. And that's really what I get. And that's also how I navigate, not fully understanding some of the texts and their complexities and how far out they are, and how are we like discussing the creation of the universe, and it feels like, well, that's way beyond me. That really is way beyond me. But the wisdom that comes out of it, and the desire to connect with the Lord, it's really, it's nurturing, magical. Just singing Damodarastaka, and as we read the translation, it's just like, what? Like, God is being kissed and his cheeks are red and his mother has a weeping stick. What? Mother Yasoda beats God? How does that happen? Like, really? With a weeping stick? And it feels incomprehensible in some ways. And then for me, the part that really nurtures is, and I offer my respects to that rope that bounds the Lord, which is love. That love is the one thing that can conquer the Lord, and that's like nurturing to the heart, and everything else that doesn't make sense just like dissipates. And then it's like, so whenever I offer my candle, I usually my most important offering is to that rope, to the love, to the bhakti, whatever love I can develop to get a little closer to Krishna. And that's how I navigate some of this very complex and difficult texts. And I hope this gives you kind of like a really good overview of like how did we got here? Why are we talking about this? And where does this lead? That this leads to developing love for Krishna, not just some empirical or descending scientific knowledge. Now I can see the stars differently because I understand where the universe is coming. That, I mean, for some people that might do it. For me, that's not really what I'm interested in. So before I want to read the translation again, and I want to share some realizations on the purport. But before I do that, I want to open the floor for comments, realizations, questions, anything you want to share to the conversation, online or in person.
A lot of gratitude for you setting the stage.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not as up on the reading, so to see the full picture and to yes, get out of this mind of science and then to the whole point, which is love. It's really helpful. So I appreciate how you're leading this class. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for your class. Thank you for your excitement and enthusiasm. I really love that part. About the last point you made, I found it very fascinating that I do a Bhagavad Gita reading, and some women come and some, it's their first exposure to the Bhagavad Gita, and I'm always thinking, well, it doesn't make any sense what we are reading, or it must be very far out for them, or anything like that going through my mind, my doubting mind. And then at the end we do a pearl. And my observation is that it doesn't matter. It seems that sometimes, like for people who start coming, their pearl are really off, like so far off from what we read. And we don't come. But people keep coming back, and then after a while the pearl change, and you become closer and closer to what we read. Another phenomena also I experience, and I mainly see others experiencing, is that it doesn't matter if one understands or doesn't understand. And further than that, it doesn't matter if one believes or doesn't believe. The experience is the same. There's an experience of something that's like thrilling, exciting, I did Krishna book just a few days, Friday, with someone who's gone away from Krishna book and gone away from the philosophy and away even from personalism and away, far away. And that person shared like, wow, I feel so happy right now. And it was just like, it was like joy. Joy is this happiness with no reason. So there's a lot of that happening as
Direct
we read.
experience.
Even if the mind is challenged, even if our intellect is challenged, even if our sense of logic or rationale is challenged, parallel to that, there's always something else.
Yeah.
And of course, most people, they can kind of deny it or avoid it or pretend it's not there, but it's always there.
Yeah, the spirit is moved, even if the mind can't make sense. The
Yeah.
spirit is moved to joy and happiness and fulfillment.
Yeah.
And then maybe to some extent we go to a place of like, oh, it doesn't make sense. I'm gonna throw it away and pretend like it's not there. And yeah. I can relate to that. And what came up for me yesterday in the class also is that we're talking about faith and a lot of my experience of faith in the Judeo-Christian tradition is that faith is this thing that you suspend judgment until you die, and then you realize whether it's true or not. That's kind of like my sense of faith. It's like, don't question, just keep doing, just keep going, and then when you die, you'll know whether it's right or wrong. Whereas in our tradition, faith is about putting our heart into it and then getting an experience, direct experience, and then we move from one experience to the other, and we get confirmation. And faith is that it's alive. It's a living principle that we move through, like Shraddha, placing your heart into something and moving through it. And there's confirmation. You mentioned Bhagavad Gita yesterday. It's directly experienced.
Directly experienced.
Yeah, that's kind of what you're saying, is that it's directly experienced.
If you like it or not.
Yes. Yeah, that was my experience when I read the Sri Upanishad. It just spoke to me like in such deep. I was like, wow, what's happening here? Like, why am I being touched in this way? And all the philosophical books in the world can't compare to this like really small book, really small text. And I read it and I read it again and I read it again and I read it again, and like kept like touching that soul, that spark in the soul. And there's still a part of me that wants to reject and deny some of the logical things. Krishna, like, he's blue and runs around cows. It's like, what? Like, doesn't he have anything better to do? Yeah, I mean, there's times where my mind goes there, but the experience and the heart, and that's
Undeniable.
undeniable. Yes.
But we can deny it.
Yes.
It's undeniable.
Undeniable.
We can choose to deny it.
And we still deny it. Yes.
Well, relates to the principles of with the question that Casey asked yesterday, and that part of the discussion, that like, yeah, the mind, my mind, material mind can go to this way. It goes online, see the group, and vice versa, and yeah, so the mind, this doesn't make sense, this and that, but then the soul, which is chit potency, full of knowledge, the soul just undeniable, can't deny. This is truth. This is satisfying. And then and then Krishna Kaviraj Goswami says, if you like logic and argument, apply your faculties for logic and argument to the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, to the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita, and you'll find it strikingly wonderful if we do apply it. But as Krishna says, on the logical, rational path, if one is sincere, then they'll come to these to the conclusion that Vasudev Sri Krishna is the source of everything, and the false ego and material mind and intellect is by definition not sincere. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to find ways to avoid practicing bhakti, and so, but I don't want to just say, I just want material sense gratification. I want to be the center of the universe. I don't want to say that. So just like I'll find reasons. So like, I have very intellectual reasons for stopping to follow these principles like that. So, Hare Krishna.
And just like Dhritarashtra says, he doesn't say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to hurt my nephews
Yeah,
and be
yeah.
religious." No,
Yeah.
he actually finds all sorts of arguments.
Some obscure dharmic principle.
Yeah.
This is actually the reason.
Amongst the many things that I appreciated from your class, I like the very point that you made at the end, that the prayer when you're offering your obeisance that it's to the rope. That part never made sense. Like, why are we offering obeisances to the rope? Like, what's the point of the rope? And we said, oh, it's the only thing. It's actually the love that that can bind Krishna. I was like, oh, okay, and that's why we offer obeisances.
But you are submissive, you're still offering obeisances to the rope.
Yes, that doesn't make sense. Why are we offering obeisances to the rope?
You still did it.
Something in you thought, okay, there's got to be some truth here. Yeah.
I just wanted to share the way that you were relating it to like your experience, and it was like specifically because that helped me like just like ground and focus. You know, sometimes classes on philosophy can kind of just go away in my mind, but like I can feel like the realization of the part of being present.
See, there's a hand up on the.
Okay. Nitya Gopal. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you very much for our enlivening class. I was specifically touched by your one point where you mentioned that how Srila Prabhupada books, his purport is very nourishing. And I was just reflecting how Srila Prabhupada himself, being the representative of Srimati Radharani, who is a supreme mother and who is a supreme source of all the nourishment, he's carrying all these moods so that we can be nourished. And if we are in that mood of absorbing those nourishment from Srila Prabhupada, coming from Srimati Radharani, we can be completely and perfectly be nourished. I was reflecting on this one.
Yeah, sure, Prabhupada ki.
Sure.
Yeah, I recently heard somebody express that Prabhupada didn't write his books with scholarship in mind. That his books are full of scholarship, very profound, but he wrote them out of deep compassion and love for us.
Wow.
And that really moved me. Yeah, that's when Prabhupada is sending our love, his love through the books and the love of Srimati Radharani to bring us back into the service.
Thanks for sharing that. Prabhupada, he happens to be the foremost Vedic scholar of the age.
Yeah.
At the same time, yeah, he didn't like write the books. I'll be known as a scholar. Just wrote it out of care, compassion, and love for us. And then we can to encourage people to come to Prabhupada. For some, they'll be enamored. Like, well, he is the foremost Vedic scholar of the age, but that's not where he was coming from. Thanks for that.
And also, I have heard from Srila Prabhupada biographies that always his father used to pray to Krishna, that let my son be the dear servant of Srimati Radharani. So in that way, even from the very beginning, it was very evident that how he's going to manifest Srimati Radharani's mercy to all of us.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. Anyone else would like to share?
One question about the 10 and the 3 and.
All right. If not, I want to read the translation, but before that, I actually want to read from the previous chapter, because I was mentioning how like the Vidura's inquiry to really know about the Lord where it comes from, and this is one of the verses that spoke to me about that, where he says, text 5 of chapter 5, so the chapter right before, Vidura saying to Maitreya, he says, "O great sage, kindly narrate how the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the independent, desireless Lord of the three worlds and the controller of all energies, accepts incarnations and creates the cosmic manifestation with perfect arrangement, regulative principles for its maintenance. So, this is why we're getting this answer. He asked that question. Tell me how does the law create the cosmic manifestation with perfectly arranged regulative principles for its maintenance? How does this inconceivable thing happen? So then Maitreya is narrating how it happens.
This is big machine.
Yes.
Big machine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll read the translation one more time. The total energy of the Mahatattva in the form of the gigantic Virat Rupa divided himself by himself into the consciousness of the living entities, the life of activity and self-identification, which are subdivided into 1, 10, and 3, respectively.
I appreciate the point you made about, I always looked at the question from the sages, to other sages or like that, about the creation as merciful. Even Arjuna,
Yeah.
I always look at it like, okay, it's important for us to hear. We need to hear about the prison, how the prison works, and what's the door, the prison, and if there is a door, and like the whole, like there is a tool, and there is everything is really all the agency of that prison. And so that I always look at it from that perspective. And the perspective you just brought in is very, very sweet. Of like the devotee want to know every aspect of his beloved, including like the aspect of the material creation. And it makes sense because like if we look at our attraction for each other, like we have attraction, and usually it's one opulence or another, or more than one. Like some people are attracted by beauty. They have a partner and they need to be handsome or beautiful. Or some people are attracted by power, or there is different opulence like that. And in that, Krishna shows so much of his opulence. And it can really trigger like being impetus for the love of the devotee. Like, wow, Krishna is so intelligent. Like, like more far out than the Hollywood movies. It's so intelligent. It's so creative. And it is so powerful. And like really be an impetus and trigger for the love of the devotees. So I appreciate that point.
Thank you. Far out.
Krishna,
inconceivable, beautiful.
Yeah. And I was like, he has a system. It's just a system, and we can try to jinx the system. We are not going to succeed. Even Hiranyakashipu couldn't jinx the system, even so he had way more power and he was the most intelligent being at the time, most intelligent being, and so powerful, so austere, so renounced.
He tried to beat the system.
He tried to beat the system.
He tried to beat the system. He tried to jinx it, and he couldn't. And so we are not going because we are not even small.
Not even close.
Yeah.
But somehow I still think I might do it.
Yeah.
Me too. This question isn't about the essence. I just got stuck on self-identification of material products. What does that mean?
Oh, you're looking at me?
Yes. Yeah. It's interesting. I'll add to that question also that Adibautika, Adidaivika, and Adhyatmika.
Yeah.
It's kind of presented a little bit differently
So,
than
but
I'm
different
used to.
parts of the Bhagavatam, they are presented
Yeah.
differently, but because also in the second canto, they are presented at different principles, not anymore the klesha.
Yeah.
It's not the suffering anymore. They are just
Just
different principles that run the universe. Yeah.
Well, that gets into it. You opened a door there. And it's like this vista of millions of miles. Yeah, well, one thing comes to me. I think it's related to the kleshas. We're talking about life is difficult, the threefold miseries, I think it's related to that. And here it's basically where there's the I me mine. George Harrison has a song, I me mine. So like the Yatmaka, the identification. This consciousness is divided into three modes of self-identification according to the proportion of purity. So Yatmika is just like, I am this body. So we're of course way beyond that. But that's,
Body and mind.
yeah, I'm the body and mind. Okay, so that's the I, and that relates because basically material life. That's why bhakti is a revolution in consciousness. Material life are just like, okay, like Nitya Gopal mentioned about Radha Krishna. We have Radha Krishna. So material life is, I want to be the center of the rasa dance. Okay, that's material life. I want to be the center. I want the accolades and the appreciation. Ishvaraham Hambogi Siddham Balavan Sukhi. I'm the controller, I'm the enjoyer, I'm perfect, powerful, happy. The only problem is that you don't all realize that. That's material life. That's material life. So that's the I. Okay. And then there's the mind, like so yeah, this is me, the body. So there's that concentrated bodily concept and an extended bodily concept. This is me, and this is my house, rather than this is Srila Prabhupada's ashram, it's Krishna's house. Let me use it in their service. This is my card, this is my bank account, this is my relationship to enjoy. So that's mine. So the different, and that would be the adibhatik. Adibhatik is the mind. Okay. And
Not the mind.
yeah, M-I-N-E.
Everything around.
Yeah.
It's really society, friendship, and love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Society, friendship. Yeah, that was a theme of the recent enlightenment program at Damayanti and Garuda's. And then it's like bhakti. It's a viplavu, tadvad visargo janataga viplavu. It's a Bhagavatam. It's a revolution in consciousness. That it's like, no, I'm spirit, soul, Jivara, Srupai, Krishna, and it's just I'm a servant of Krishna, and so I'm not the body, I'm spirit, soul. And then Adi Devik here, it's a different sort of way of describing Adi Devik than we're used to. But for me, I think there is kind of a bridge. The Devik, Adi Devik, sometimes it means like the disturbances caused by nature, demigods, earthquakes, hurricanes, things like that. But Adi Devik, we can see the term Deva, which indicates the godly. There's something divine. David, divine. It's the same root. Okay. So then Adi Devik, so it's the beginning of purity of consciousness in pursuance of the desire of the Lord. That okay. No, there's something divine about me. I'm not this gross matter. There's something divine. I'm spirit, soul. I'm a servant. And what I'm getting from that is like, even if we're not, yes, I'm a servant of Sri Krishna, personality of Godhead, but the idea, let me serve something bigger than myself, even if it's not yet the full boss of the boss, but that sort of identification. I'm not the body, I'm a divine spark. Then that's purer than the Yatmaka. I am this body and this is mine and it's for my enjoyment. So it's like different levels of consciousness. Those some things I'm getting from that. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, it answers or expands on the translation that in the translation
Yes.
Prabhupada says, and self-identification, which is subdivided into 1, then 10 and 3 respectively. So I think Prabhupada is expanding on the 3 expansions of that self-identification.
Hare Krishna.
Srimad Bhagavatam ki.
Right. Srila Prabhupada ki.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you all for your presence and association. Hare Hare Bol. Hare Krishna.